There's world changers or wannabe world changers who think they have to change a billion people, and there's the real world changers who change the world for one person.
To say rejection is not a bad thing. It's the fertilizer for your dreams to grow in.
But if I quit, then I've lied to them and I've lied to myself.
Self-confidence really does come from keeping your word to yourself. Every time that you keep your word to yourself on what you said you were going to do, you build a little bit of self-confidence, right?
I'm David Specht, and this is Keep This in Mind.
Welcome to Keep This in Mind. I am David A. Specht, and I am super excited today. I say that every time, but I mean, when I get to talk to people that really have something to share, I get excited. And today, my guest is Blaine Little. And before I read his bio, and I mean, I know that's like one of the cardinal rules, you never like read something, but before I read his bio, I want you to know that Blaine and I have a little bit of history. I have seen this man in action through Middle Tennessee Association of Realtors when he led a training when I was going through the core program. And can I tell you, the man is engaging. He is not only interested, but he's interesting. And that is a 1-2 punch for anybody who's in the speaking world, as he'll share with you. But let me read his bio, because I think you want to know exactly who we're talking to. What is the credentials for this man? Why is he on the show, other than the fact that he was wise enough to beat me over the head until I let him on? No, Blaine is an author, corporate trainer, and professional speaker who helps organizations improve leadership, teamwork, and interpersonal communication. And that's the thing we're really going to be talking about today. Drawing on decades of experience working with leaders across a wide range of industries, Blaine focuses on practical strategies that reduce misunderstandings, strengthen workplace relationships, and build trust. He is the author of the 8 Managerial Challenges and is currently completing his book, The Communication Key, scheduled for release later this fall. Through Momentum seminars, he delivers keynote presentations and training programs like the one we went through at MTAR that help people communicate more clearly, lead more effectively, and work better together. Welcome to the show, Blaine. Glad to have you here, sir.
David, thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this, and I'm absolutely just stoked to be here and ready to dive right in.
Awesome.
And thank you for your kind words, by the way. I appreciate that. That's very nice.
Oh, yeah. Let me kind of give the people context who may not be in the real estate world.
Okay.
Core is a 2-day or 3-day, I think it was 3-day long basics of everything you need to know in Middle Tennessee real estate. And it can be very, very dry.
It's a lot.
And Blaine was the after lunch speaker. And you never want to be the after lunch speaker, because everybody's hitting that 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock. Yes. and he kept us engaged. And that is a testimony to what you do, what you bring to the table. You talked about communication that day, even about generational communication, and how as real estate professionals, we needed to be able to speak to people in their language. I want to kind of dive into that just a little bit. What do you mean by when you want to speak to people in their language?
Well, it really goes to, and kind of the spine or the main thesis of my book, The Communication Key, is that we not just want to be heard, we really want to be understood. And that means I have a thought up here. How do I transfer that exact thought to you? And it really is thought transference, because the more words we use, the more challenges we have to get our thoughts, our true thoughts, across to others. And that's the challenge. But most people don't realize that, because you hear your own voice. We talk to ourselves, either, one of the modalities, we do talk to ourselves, and it seems crystal clear to us because we're the ones saying it to us. But if we have a thought that we want to get across to somebody else, it may be very difficult. It usually is very difficult to make our own thoughts known. And this is why sometimes we say things and it's taken the wrong way.
So I want to dive a little bit into that. Do you remember a time maybe where you said something or you had a conversation with somebody that you thought was extremely clear, only to find out that it wasn't, and not only was it not clear, it was completely misconstrued?
Yeah. Gosh, let me think. Let me go back. Yeah, it was yesterday on my sofa with my wife. And every time, I shouldn't say this, but every time, I mention that I'm a communications expert, she snickers a little bit. But that's kind of the part of the difference between men and women. And even if you've lived with somebody for a quarter century or more, then it's still kind of tricky. And that's one of the chapters that I'm writing about, is the differences between men and women specifically, because as we're expressing our ideas, we present them many times in different ways. And I get kind of granular into what does it mean in terms of the long stare or leaning forward or not. But yeah, I mean, it happens to me a lot. And so feedback is so very important. And you want to make sure that they understood what it was that you were saying. But therein lies the rub, David. If you say, does that make sense? What are you calling me, stupid?
Oh, yeah.
So, you have to watch there about how you say that. So,
Yes.
did I explain that well is a better way of putting that. But getting that feedback, and especially if you have somebody who knows you well enough to kind of give you the benefit of the doubt, like, I don't think that's what you meant to say, then you can have a second bite of the apple and try again.
I've seen a lot of this, especially in, like you said, in gender dynamics. I've seen it in generational dynamics. It's so funny because you're right. I hate to I feel like I'm fast forwarding and reversing the tape. Those of you who know what a tape is, but you said something that really resonated, and that was, people don't want to be heard; they want to be understood. And for me, what I see a lot of is, because I understand, I assume you understand when I say it. And I've seen this happen. Oh, I'll be on a Zoom like this, and Zooms are probably the number one offender in this area, because you're on there, in the Brady Bunch boxes, and you're explaining yourself, and you understand it 100%, right? But then somebody else may not, but you're like, does everybody understand where I'm coming from? And no, and there's this whole pressure not to raise your hand and go, Dave, I didn't quite get that last part about, what do you mean we got to make money? So, to that, have you seen that, like, that problem get exacerbated in the digital age, in the post-COVID age?
Yeah, and when we were hit with COVID, I went through a number of sessions just to become a better web trainer at that time, and so a lot of the rules are very different, but you lose a lot of the impact because you don't always see all my hand gestures. You don't see my posture at all, really, unless I'm maybe just leaning a little bit. But there's a lot of things like, what does across legs mean? What does it mean when your heels are shoulder width apart versus tight together? What does it mean if you're just kind of leaning one way? And those little subtle nuances, I mean, you can't really see that on Zoom. And so a lot of times people are not learning that interpersonal communication because they spend so much time on the screen. And you and I are of a certain age that we've kind of been through that. I saw a I think I reposted it. It was a video back from the 80s, and some people had just come out of the movie Back to the Future, and there was a reporter saying, "What do you think of the movie?" And then Imagine, one of these days, people are saying that you'll be able to talk, you'll be able to carry your telephone around with you in your pocket and talk to people face to face. And they're like, wow, that's nuts. That's crazy. Who wants to do that? But here we are. And the younger people, millennials, especially Gen Z, they don't necessarily have the benefit of that experience. And it's not their fault. It's just kind of what they came up through. And I think because of COVID, David, a lot of Gen Z, they're starting to see that, and they're at least sort of kind of peering into some of these other issues, and kind of wanting to do more one-on-one dialogues, or at least have a certain amount of time each day with their friends that way.
So, and again, I don't want to get lost in generational discussions, because I think, that horse has been beaten to death so many times by so many people. But I do want to bring this up. You talk about interpersonal communication. You talk about disconnect, and you talk about, for lack of a better term, intrinsic validation, the desire to be understood. How many of us, myself included, and what can I do about it, begin to paint somebody with a brush because they don't have a skill that's not any fault of their own to express themselves or to show their value? How do we keep from just writing them off and saying, well, this person's lazy, or this person is this, or because I see that a lot. I see people broad brushing an entire generation going, well, they're entitled, or they're this, or they're that. And it's like, actually, they're just different, and they process different.
Yeah. That's a great point, because if you don't have the skill sets, then you may come across a bit standoffish, or just kind of at least awkward. And I have some family members who are on the spectrum, and so that's not an easy skill set for them. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's not an easier skill set for them to pick up on. But like I said earlier, you just have a lot of people with a lack of experience. In my first book, The 8 Managerial Challenges, I talked about what's called propinquity. And it sounds like proximity. It's kind of a little similar, but it's the effect that something has on you, or someone has on you, when you are near them. Okay? Over 1 million people go to the Louvre each year to see the Mona Lisa. I've got it right here. What do I need to go to France? I don't understand. But people will buy a plane ticket, go to the City of Lights, and go visit that museum because they want to see it with their own eyes. They want to be in presence of it to see how everyone else is reacting to it. And they want to be able to come away from that with some sort of a story. And those are things that you just don't get through a little box.
Wow. I was just thinking about, again, the timing of this is really crazy, but so yesterday, you're gonna laugh, and I'm showing my age now, by the way. Yesterday, through an organization that I'm a part of for veterans, I got free tickets to Saturday night's Barry Manilow concert at Bridgestone Arena. Now, to your point, and again, I said I'm showing my age, but to your point, why would I be excited about that when I can, like you said, I can pick this up, I can put on headphones that make me, I can wear a virtual reality, mask. There's just something about being in a room with other humans, listening or viewing a human, showcasing his talent, that you don't experience
right
unless you're in the room.
Yes.
And yet there is this huge fear right now. And I'm not blaming anything. I'm talking about the reality. There's a huge fear of the room, any room. It could be a networking event. It could be a training. It can be a meeting, you call. It could be going back to the office. I can't tell you the number of times I've heard people complaining about, well, they've gotten rid of work from home. We got to go back to the office, and there is a legitimate, real anxiety to that. But at the same time, I think it's absolutely necessary for us to get back around other people on a regular basis, which I think is hilarious considering we're actually doing this interview through the wonders of technology.
Not hypocrites at all.
No, not at all. But I want to steer the conversation to, and I talk to leaders all the time. You talk to leaders all the time. What is our responsibility as leaders in the areas of communication and presence?
Well, number one, great show. I saw him at the Bridgestone probably about 15, 16 years ago. And you're right, it is worth being there. I'm not a huge Barry Manilow fan.
No, I'm not either.
But I remember all the songs back in the 70s and in the early 80s, and I could go there, David, and I was singing along every song with everybody else.
Yeah.
The thousands of people around me. You can't do that everywhere. And that is a shareable moment. That's truly shareable moment. And it goes back to the Mona Lisa. Why would you need to go to the Louvre to see a tiny little painting when you can just pull it up on your right here? But you talk about leaders, and you're exactly right. It's going to take leadership. When I wrote my first book, The 8 Managerial Challenges, it was, everybody asked me, how long does it take to write a book? And I say, well, about 3.5 years plus a pandemic, because I had a lot of conferences that just shut down. And I said, I've got no excuse to not finish this book. And so I did. And towards the end, I put in a little section that talks about managing your people remotely. But there's a reason why managers want people to come back into the office. Maybe even, I will say it's necessary. I'm not going to say it's necessary every day. It's not. But it is necessary to come in on occasion, because we need to understand those idiosyncrasies. So really right now, I mean, we've met in person, we've just sat down casually and chit-chatted and everything. But really right now I'm performing because I'm on the camera. So I am presenting to you a workshop trainer, keynote speaker, but you don't necessarily get to know the true me this way. We're all performing. And to some extent, we do all put on facades, but eventually we kind of lower those. Here, it's not as easy because we feel as though we have to perform a certain way. That was a great question, a lot in there, and I forgot every little thing. But our
responsibilities
the leaders are just going to have to start insisting, and kind of, if you gotta pull people kicking and dragging, so be it. You're not the only one. The church groups are saying, why don't you come back? Their civic organizations are saying, why don't you come back? Because, we talk about inclusion a lot today. Well, what's the core of inclusion? It's collaboration. It's to collaborate. And this is how innovation develops, is through sparking ideas off of one another. And yes, I'm sorry, those sparks are somewhat deadened by electronic means. You don't really see all the little micro nuances. I said something and she slightly raised her eyebrows. There might be something there. What is she just thinking? Is that something that I can use? So there is a huge difference. And this is why management is wanting people to come back in. I don't know if Jamie Dimon of Chase Manhattan Bank, I don't know if he's ever gotten or Elon, if they've gotten all their people back into the office or not. They were making firings because they felt it was just that important. But yeah, you have to interact with others and just find out some things that are not necessarily work related.
Mm,
This is going to be work related
right.
to find out what makes that person tick.
One of the things that I'm reminded of, and I don't know if you know this story or not, but when Steve Jobs was designing Apple's headquarters, and I don't remember if it's the one in Austin or the one that they had in Palo Alto, but ergonomically it made no sense. You know, he like for one person to go from one area to another, they had to walk through almost a labyrinth of other departments. And they asked him, you know, why did he do this? And he said, because you never know how many random collaborations will take place just by people running into each other on the way to somewhere else. Now, this was pre-COVID. And again, I hate defining our entire world pre-COVID, post-COVID, but the idea there, and I can remember even in my own newspaper, you know, I would go from the newsroom to the ad department or the ad department to circulation or whatever. And they're, you know, hey, how are you doing today? Or, hey, what's going on there? And when you began to find out what was going on in somebody's life, or you found out what somebody was working on, there was these little micro moments that either built rapport or offered a solution, you know, innovation. Because, you know, the guy in the newsroom may have gone to a city council meeting where they found out that, you know, XYZ store is coming to town, and he says it to the advertising guy who's like, hey, here's Bob's bringing this store to town, and here's his contact information. And that doesn't happen without interaction.
Yeah.
And Siri wants to know about it too. But we've lost a little bit of that, don't you believe? In as a whole over the last 6 years,
we have, and to your point, there might not even be a Buc-ee's being built if it weren't for some collaboration on some part. But this really goes to what the leadership guru Peter Drucker said. What he meant by management by walking around. And he meant just going out within your department, circulating, and not micromanaging, but just saying, touching base with people. How you doing? Do you have any problems? Anything I can help you with? And he would go from one department to another. Because, yeah, it's exactly the point, is that you can come across a challenge that one department has where the first department isn't necessarily working on that, but they may still have the solution, and you're the only person who knows it. Now, will that be replaced by AI? I don't know. But right now, we need to collaborate, and there's no innovation. There's nothing new unless we have that honest collaboration.
So one of the things I thought about too, as you were talking about what Drucker said, was in his book, Entree Leadership, Dave Ramsey wrote about catching people doing the right thing as management. You know, that if all we look at are numbers, if all we look at are shortcomings, it's very difficult to celebrate your people, and they don't ever feel celebrated. And people who don't feel celebrated end up finding work elsewhere. It's hard. It really is. In a disconnected world, how do you catch somebody doing the right thing? How do you listen in on a conversation and they handle an objection properly? Or, you know, it baffles me how much communication we have lost.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, you know, the idea that you're writing a book on communication in 2026, if you'd have asked me in 2019, does a new communication book need to be written? I'd be like, absolutely not. There's a whole library full of them. But in 2026, that has all changed. So kind of talk to me about, and I may have just stolen your thunder, I don't know, but what was the inspiration for writing the communication key as you continue to put the finishing touches on?
And Ramsey's book is a great one, by the way. I wasn't sure when I first started reading it because he's a financial guy, but yeah, that's a really good book. entree leadership. But yeah, the reason why, and it's kind of one of my pillars of professional development, leadership, team building, better communication skills, and I have a major book for all three. I can go to a communications workshop, as I have done hundreds of times, stand up there, and I can say, how many of you consider yourself a pretty good communicator? The majority of hands will go up. Now, if I go to a place, maybe to a church class or someplace where there's couples, and I ask the question, how many of you can say your spouse is a really good communicator? There's fewer hands, David, that go up. So that's an affirmation that we're missing something. And we need to, as the kids say, go out and touch grass, just kind of get out of our own little bubbles, stop trying so much to be an influencer and try to be influential with the people around you. And we've just got to get out of our comfort zone. And again, it goes to leadership, because the leaders have to be the very first ones to sort of make themselves vulnerable enough so that everyone else will begin to open up and start to communicate.
Yeah, if the boss seems unapproachable, then communication won't happen. Tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear, is one of the things that I have to reiterate. And it's not, from a leadership standpoint, you never get there. It's always in process, because you hire new people, you let some go, there's attrition, or there's a new problem, and this problem seems bigger than any problem we've ever faced. How's he going to react? So I see that so much. And I agree with you that as leadership, we have to say, hey, I struggle with this too. I see things. My dad, who passed away many years ago, was one of the worst at top-down communication. And he was a great communicator, but he withheld information out of maybe fear that he would either be not respected that he needed to be, or it was none of their business. Well, and I saw that was one of the traits that I did not want to follow. If I'm telling a sales department that they got to sell more, they need to know why they have to sell more. If I'm telling, the circulation department we need more subscriptions, or if I'm in real estate, if I'm telling I need to be able to tell a listing that your price point is too high, and let me tell you why, not knowing that I might not get that listing, that vulnerability or that intestinal fortitude to be able to share that tough information doesn't come easy. It's a skill you have to build. As you have outlined in your book, what are some of the key skills we have to build in communication if we want to be better at it?
You really are bringing it back around more and more towards leadership. I mean, yeah, we say that the leader has to actually lead and be the first one. But yeah, even in opening up and creating a better corporate culture, it goes to leadership. And I'm thinking of Simon Sinek's Start With Why. So many times I've come across leaders, you probably have too, that feel that there's this information that it's on a need to know basis. Why? Are there any state secrets there? Why would you not explain to everybody the direction that you're going? It makes no sense to me. And also, something that I saw, Dr. Ralph Hillman sent me a video a few years before he passed away. He was a mentor of mine, about Simon Sinek. And he really kind of turned me on to Simon Sinek. And in the video, Simon says, sorry, corporate America, it falls to you to train your workforce on how to better communicate, on how to show up prepared. And that's just the way it is, because for whatever reason, the millennials didn't get that message. And we probably have to look at Generation X for not making sure they got the messages in terms of showing up on time. So a 9 a.m. start time doesn't mean you're driving onto the parking lot.
Right.
These sorts of things.
Oh, there's a phrase that I can't remember who said it, but they said this, and it smacked me. I laughed, but then it was like you're one of those laugh, and then ooh, that kind of hurt. And it said, "We are the clouds that produce the snowflakes that we see around us today." And I was
that is funny and stings. Wow, you're exactly right.
Yeah. I will say this though, and it's not a generational communication is not a generational problem. Let me kind of explain, because I think you'll get some out of this, and I think you'll be able to add something to this. I know of a company that their ownership, it's a small business, but their ownership came from corporate. Okay, escape the corporate rat race, and it's a service-based business, people helping people. And the corporate mindset of the ownership is making some changes in this business, which is, again, no problem there, but they're not explaining why, and they're using terminology that falls short, like KPIs. If you're a 1 or 2 man shop, you don't know what a KPI is, nor do you necessarily care. You just know, I've got to help this person, or fill this shift, or do this. The other thing they do is they'll say, we're doing this, or this is the new procedure, but not explaining why we have to even change procedures. And I get, it's not something that I'm actively involved in, but I get it secondhand. And the people that work for them are not millennials. They're not Gen Z. They're Gen X / high-end millennials. And even they are frustrated because they don't. But when ownership then finally explains why, they kind of fall in line. Then they're like, okay, I get it now. I may not necessarily understand it 100%, but at least I get why you're trying to make this shift.
Yeah.
And gosh, this is probably more common than it is uncommon.
It is. And unfortunately, it's kind of going to old school thinking, but I'm starting to realize maybe the millennials are picking up on a little bit of that bad habit of withholding some information. It's on a need to know basis. Well, why? Your people need to know. And if they think that you're hiding something from them, that's going to sever trust. And people are not going to follow you like they should if there's not trust established. This is the 21st century. There's very few things that are secret. So just explain to your people. And they, if they don't get all the nuts and bolts, okay. But they need to understand the direction and what is the purpose and what does the end result look like. That's what they need to know, because we should be more empowering of individual employees today than we ever have. After World War II, your parents, my parents, they were just happy to have a job. And then, Gen X said, well, I don't need your corporate ladder. I'll make my own. Right. And, a millennial comes to you with an issue and you say, well, I'm sorry, we tried that before, but it doesn't work. And that millennial will come back Monday morning with an app that makes it work.
Yeah.
So there's nothing that you're going to withhold eventually, but why waste 2 or 3 weeks or months acting like there's some sort of a secret? And I've seen this play out so many times, and it's frustrating, even for someone who's not involved. I'm just on the sideline seeing this. I'm like, this is frustrating. So stop hitting your people with surprises and start being more communicative. I say that communication is the foundation of good leadership, and you have to start there. If it doesn't matter what your reports say, reports are important, yes. It doesn't matter what school you went to, what your reports say. If you can't talk to your people, you've got nothing in terms of a leader.
Mm. Well, that's a mic drop moment. And as we wrap things up today, I kind of want to turn everybody on to you're wrapping up the book, or so that there's a little external pressure there to to get it across the finish line.
Yes, and I'll tell you, kind of in keeping with your theme of something that Mind What Matters, is that I'm adding another chapter on self-talk, because that's where it all begins, really. And I'm thinking more like, I really got to do something about why do we ruminate over things? How do we treat ourselves internally? And so that's another chapter that I'm adding. And it seems like I'm keep pushing the date back because I keep adding chapters and I don't want to, but here we are.
Well, coming out in the fall. Fall goes all the way through November, so you're safe there. So tell us, how can people follow you? How can if they're driving or if they're on the treadmill? Let's keep it as simple as possible. What are some of the best ways to get in touch with you and follow you?
You can get all my social links and all my contact information at momentumseminars.com. Momentumseminars.com. And momentumseminars.com/books, and you'll get to the books that I have written there as well.
Fantastic. Blaine, thank you so much for being on the show. It has been not only insightful, it's been entertaining, which is what we want to get. Again, digital world, we got to keep attention. Which brings me back to what I always say at the end of the show. Guys, if you're doing anything, you need to apply what you're learning, because it's not knowledge that is power. It's applied knowledge that is power. God bless. Thank you, sir. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks for keeping this in mind today. If something landed, share this with someone who needs it. And if you haven't already, follow the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Connect with me at davidaspeck.com, and I'll see you next time. God bless.